Thank you everyone for joining. Oh my goodness. I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. We have thousands and thousands of people registered for this evening's mass call, and we're grateful for each and every one of you. As you join, drop in your name and your city in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. Link up. If you see someone in the chat from your city, give it a big heart. We've got Detroit coming in. Hi, Tanya. Hi, Vanessa, Sam, Janine, Laura. Welcome, everyone. Welcome so much. Just like that, we have almost 1,000 people on this call. We have 5,000 people registered for this call. We are so fired up. There's no words. We're happy for each and every person to be here. I want to hand it over to our interpreters because this call is going to be so accessible to everyone. So briefly, I want to turn it over to our interpreter, Felipe, so that everyone in the now, we're already up, we're above 1,000 folks on the call right now. Everyone knows how to listen and to participate to this Moms Rising mass call. Felipe?
Thank you, Monifa. Good evening, everyone. My name is Felipe, and together with my colleague Mortado, we're going to be your simultaneous interpreters. Simultaneous interpretation is the same as simultaneous translation, real-time translation. We're going to have simultaneous interpretation in this meeting, and if you want to hear a translation of everything that is spoken in Spanish into English, and you're using a computer, click on the icon in the shape of a globe at the bottom of your screen, and then click on English. And if you're using a smartphone or a tablet, scroll all the way to the end of the menu at the bottom of your screen, tap on the three dots, tap on language interpretation, and tap on done. Muy buenas noches a todos, soy Felipe, junto con mi colega Murtado seremos sus intérpretes simultáneos o traductores simultáneos, como se conoce también, para escuchar una interpretación de todo lo que se habla en inglés al español y están en un computador, hagan clic en el icono en forma de globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccionen español. Si están utilizando un celular o una tablet, tienen que desplazarse hasta el final del menú en la parte inferior de la pantalla, hacen clic en tres puntos, hacen clic en interpretación de idiomas, hacen clic en español y hacen clic en listo. We're going to be monitoring the chat if you happen to need any assistance. Gentle reminder to the panelists to please speak a little bit slower than usual so that we can maintain a high quality of our job. And that's it. Back to you, Monifa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Felipe. Thank you for your team. I'm getting ready to introduce our fearless co-founder and executive director. But first, I just want to say that I think in a matter of 5 minutes, I have seen every state in the nation listed in our chat. I mean, you got it's zooming by every region. There's the South, there's the East, there's the West. I see a lot of Midwest. I mean, it's just amazing. We're so fired up. And we're just so, so glad that you're here. Please stay with us. It's going to be an amazing, jam-packed hour. We've got some great guests with Media Matters. So I'm going to turn it over now to Kristen, who's calling in from Washington State.
Thank you so much, Monifa, for leading us forward, for emceeing tonight, for leading the nation forward. And thank you to everybody who's on right now. Thank you for joining. Thank you for rising. Importantly, thank you for not giving up on one another and also for not giving up on building a future where every person and child can thrive. This is important. Recently, my son came to me and he said, "Mom, I was doing some math." I was like, "What? What was the math?" And he said, "Mom, 1 in 300 people in the United States of America are now active members of Moms Rising. 1 in 300. We're 1,099,000 strong. So thank you for being part of the strength of our nation to lift all of our families." Having said that, this has been a week. I don't know about you, but this has been a week for me. It's been a week for many of us. It's been a week of devastating policies being pushed forward by the Trump White House. It's been a week of sadness. It's been a week of anger. And importantly, it's been a week of persistence. We are so thrilled to be in this movement with you. Again, over 5,000 people have RSVP'd. We are here. We are strong. We are not giving up. Persistence is what's needed right now, your persistence. And as you persist, know that you are not alone. And we're going to be talking about that tonight. Polls show that the vast majority of people in America do not support the policies that Donald Trump is putting forward right now with his ridiculous executive orders. Polls show that you are joined by the majority of people in America and where you think America should be going. And research has shown that disinformation and misinformation played a major role in how Trump got into the White House in the first place. So tonight we're going to dive into what happened. We're going to dive into what's happening, and we're going to dive into what you can do about disinformation and misinformation on this Zoom together today and into the future. As we do that, one thing is clear. We know we are still powerful together. We know that each of us are needed more than ever. And we know that our organizing, our persistence, our insistence on building a nation where every child can thrive is needed and is essential. So as we're going through tonight, we're going to share some actions that you can take because we're about learning and we're about activating. The first action, and we're going to be putting these into the Zoom chat over the course of the evening, including right now, we're organizing a group to start fighting misinformation and disinformation in a bigger way. It's the MomsRising Action Network to Stop Disinformation campaign. There's a sign up link in the chat. You can check it out. We'll re-put it in because I know the chat's going by fast, so we'll put it in a couple times. The second action link is a Let's Get Real Together. Sign up to join our online social media network of truth. We're starting a Momplify project. If you're on social media and you want to be part of Momplifying and getting the truth out, we have a link for you. That's going to be also in the chat. And the third action is we've heard a lot from a lot of people that they want to connect together locally, to engage in local action, to lift each other up locally, to learn together, and to persist together. So we're going to be putting that in the action too. One thing is clear. What is happening today does not have to be what's happening tomorrow, what's happening in 2 years, or what's happening in the next 4 years. When we did our election work this past year, 78% of our care candidates for Congress and other races actually won when they were talking about care policies. Those care policies are paid family medical leave, affordable child care, affordable care for people who are seniors and who have disabilities, and fair pay for all care workers. Those candidates won. Our policies are still popular. The candidates who are lifting our policies are still popular. We know that also every time care was on the ballot at a state level, it won too. So we are on the side of the future and of winning. And we definitely know that together we can take back the US House in 2 years. And then, of course, we're planning to take back the White House in 4. So thank you for being on. Thank you for being part of the effort to fight misinformation and disinformation. Thank you for being part of the effort to build that nation where every person can thrive. And now I'm going to turn it back over to our MC, Monifa Bandele, COO and Senior VP of MomsRising. Welcome back, Monifa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Y'all give Kristen a round of applause because, wow, wasn't it a tough year? And I'm sure each and every one of you were the executive director in the work that you were doing in your community, in your block association, at your PTA, at the school board, all of those places. So give yourselves a round of applause for being here tonight and for doing everything that you're doing to hold the line and to push us forward. We're going to get right into it. We have 2 amazing partners with us this evening. They come from Media Matters, and they are Kayla and Courtney. Let's bring them up to the stage. Give them a round of applause because it's the researchers that's going to help us fight this disinformation, slam it down whenever we see it online or when someone's talking about it at the block association meeting, we can say, that's actually factually incorrect. And they have a lot of experience doing this. So Kayla is a research director at Media Matters, where she has worked since 2018 and currently focuses on online misinformation and extremism. She holds a master's degree in chemistry research from Stony Brook University and has a background in LGBTQ media and advocacy. She's previously worked as an LGBTQ opposition researcher at Media Matters, and prior to that, interned at the Human Rights Campaign. Let's give Kayla a round of applause. And Courtney, also a research director at Media Matters, where she's also worked there since 2018. She has primarily focused on tracking and monitoring disinformation in traditional media stream and right-wing media ecosystems. She has a bachelor's degree in political science from Boston University, and she minored in history, which is actually my favorite subject because you do not know where you're going if you don't know where you have been. So let's bring them both up to the stage and turn it over to them to give their first presentation this evening, which is what is disinfo?
Thank you so much for having us. I am going to attempt to share my screen because we have some great slides for everybody. Let's see. Alrighty. Hopefully everyone can see that. Yeah. All right, thank you so much. So Courtney and I are going to talk about what is disinfo, at least in this first part of the presentation. But before we get started, I wanted to make sure that everybody is kind of on the same playing field. Everybody has a good baseline of what we're going to be talking about throughout. So we're going to be talking about various media ecosystems as we discuss and go through this presentation. So we are going to talk about social media platforms. So that's going to be your Facebook.
Hey, Kayla, can you talk up just a little bit higher? We have a few comments that want you to get a little louder because the volume is kind of low. Is that better, guys?
Just a little better?
Thumbs up. Yep, they're saying it now. They can hear
Okay.
you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to talk about, social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We're also going to talk a little bit about alternative platforms, which is, you might have heard of Truth Social, which is Trump's platform, Telegram, your 4chan, your Rumble. These are usually more fringe spaces. We'll also talk a little bit about the mainstream media, which is typically CNN, local news, ABC and CBS, Washington Post, New York Times. And then there's the right-wing media ecosystem, which you might have heard of Fox News, but there's also a lot of other outlets. We have Daily Wire, you have One American News Network, Newsmax, and so forth. Okay. So in this first presentation, what we're going to talk about is the difference between misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. We're going to talk a little bit about the right-wing noise machine, and then we're going to talk about how these right-wing narratives have been seeping into comedy, sports, and entertainment, places that are not usually political. And I'm going to turn it over to Courtney.
Hi, thank you, Kayla. So, yeah, we're just gonna get into some definitions here. Kayla, if you could bump to the next slide. Okay, so misinformation, dis, and malinformation. So misinformation, as this chart shows, it's false information that spreads regardless of intent to mislead others. So, the person sharing it may not even know that what they're sharing is misinformation, but it still spreads. Disinformation, we see a lot in the right-wing media sources we monitor, and it's deliberate. It's easily fact-checked. It's patently false. They don't care. The goal is to spread it. And malinformation is misinformation that is based in fact. So there is a kernel of truth in there, but it is taken out of context and used to mislead, harm, or manipulate. So I'll go through a few examples. So misinformation, a recent example of this is the aftermath of California wildfires. So a lot of people were spreading information about the city's budget, about Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, about the fire hydrants and water capacities. And there was so much information going around. A lot of people spreading it might think the information they're spreading is accurate. But, as they say, a lie spreads halfway around the world before the truth has gotten out of bed. Disinformation, it can be a lot more insidious because there's that intent behind it. One recent example was right-wing media and JD Vance and Donald Trump lying that Haitian migrants were eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. JD Vance's office knew from public officials that this was not true. Public officials repeatedly pushed back on this. Donald Trump still brought it up in a debate because they wanted to use a lie to dehumanize migrants, and they didn't care about the truth. Another big one is the 2020 election lies, obviously very prominent. Again, These were things that did not hold up in court, but Fox repeated it, and right-wing media repeated it anyway. Many of them, or Fox was sued by Dominion voting machines for a lot of money for the lies. And from those filings, we learned that many people within Fox knew what they were saying wasn't true. There were executives that knew it wasn't true. Sean Hannity knew things being said on his show weren't true, but they didn't care because they were advancing the lie intentionally. And then malinformation, one example is deceptively editing interviews to present them out of context. Again, this isn't editing an interview to like change what they're saying, but it's to bring it out of context. An example is a Kamala Harris video went viral last year, where she was talking about concerns with people having families and children because of climate change, and they spread that to say she was anti-child, and, you know, dismiss climate change. We see this a lot with topics such as immigration as well, where they'll take one story that is true and they use it to demonize whole groups of people. And this can be difficult to push back on because people respond or seemingly respond a lot more to emotional stories than they do facts, context, nuance, things like that. You're muted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, we're going to talk a little bit about the right-wing noise machine as well. So when we say the right-wing noise machine, we're talking about this enormous, well-oiled media apparatus. You have a coordinated network of politicians, political figures, think tanks, different organizations. And what we see is basically a feedback loop. We see them playing off of each other. So you might see a story on right-wing media, and then it's repeated by politicians. And then, you might also see social media come into play as well. So you might see a claim on social media that then gets spread to right-wing media and then gets spread beyond that to, politicians and things like that. And we also see that coming from the fringes as well. And I think one really good example of this kind of feedback loop and how quickly it can happen is right after the day of January 6th, the insurrection. There was on 4chan, users started peddling a conspiracy theory that the rioters were not Trump supporters. They were actually Antifa or far left agitators. It's probably a claim by now you might have seen. But what was crazy about that claim is it started on 4chan, and then within a few hours by that night, it was being repeated on the House floor by Representative Matt Gaetz. And I think this is a really good example of how that media ecosystem, how that feedback loop works, and how quickly it can work. And what we've seen now in the last few months during this election is that right-wing media narratives are now seeping into places that are not typically, political. It's seeping into comedy, it's seeping into sports, it's seeping into entertainment. So ahead of the election, Trump went on several interviews, from this podcast sphere. These podcasters were typically, they focused on comedy, they focused on, they had comedians on, they would talk about maybe health, they would talk about different sports, that sort of thing. They weren't necessarily, starting off political. But what we saw was they started having political guests. This recent study from Bloomberg, it just came out, I think, within the last few days, I think really shows what we're talking about here. If you see these charts that I have here, the white part of the pie, those are the political guests. So yeah, typically they're talking about, athletes, or they're talking about comedians on Joe Rogan and on this Full Send podcast. But we start to see it seep into, into the sphere with them having some of these political guests. But then at the same time, they're also, starting to talk about gender politics, or they're starting to talk about, vaccines and the medical world. Starting to talk about elections. Maybe they're talking about gambling, or they're talking about masculinity and stuff like that. And we start to see these right-wing narratives start to seep in. And as I mentioned, Trump went on some of these podcasts, and then in return, they got invited to the inauguration. So several of them were at the inauguration. and just kind of shows that loop and what we're seeing with this additional sphere outside of the traditional spaces that, has now been bolstering Trump and the broader right-wing media. And that's what we have for the first part. So we're open to questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a lot of information. I don't know if you all were able to see the chat, but people were really inspired and informed and just giving you a lot of amens about the information that you were sharing. And I just want to answer a few questions first. A lot of people wanted to know, will there be a recording? Yes, this is streaming to YouTube, so you can watch it over and over and over again. And we will also be sharing the various slides and information and links that we are dropping in the chat. So do not worry about that. So a couple of things about the presentation that you just did. You talked about how the disinfo information bleeds into the mainstream media from online. And you talked about that there's certain issues like immigration, especially there were some terrible stories that's going to be targeted during this administration. Are there other ways that this online disinfo bleeds into mainstream media? Are you seeing that happen?
Yeah, I can jump in quickly there. I would say that, I think one of the traps that we often see coming from mainstream media like CNN or New York Times or Washington Post is that they'll start to kind of mirror the right-wing narratives in a way. So that's in addition to like what we're seeing with the spread online. And I'm going to talk a lot about, how the algorithms and things like that work a little bit later in the presentation. But if you're looking for an additional way, sometimes we get it seen parodied in the the broader mainstream media. Sometimes they'll report on it and stuff like that, and it does start to spread as well.
Yeah, they're pretty good at kind of setting the conversation and setting the terms of the agenda. And again, it's really the left has had a harder time really dominating the conversation in the way the right has been able to make certain topics, the topic of what the mainstream media is covering.
Absolutely. Well, let's get right into the next one. I did want to share an example that I've seen happen a lot on mainstream media, which is that instead of having experts on a topic, a lot of times the mainstream media will bring on these hosts from YouTube channels, other types of influencers, basically bringing on the online media makers into the mainstream media space, as opposed to sometimes even the policymakers, right? And so it's kind of like shifted the culture where people who talk about this issue on their platforms are also the experts that are brought to the mainstream media platform.
Right.
So frustrating.
And we'll probably see that more after this election because the influence of these online influencers is pretty clear. So, the media is now clamoring to kind of hear more from these people, hear what's compelling about them and things like that.
Thank you. All right, so let's go into our next segment because I think it's going to answer a lot of questions that I'm seeing in the Q&A. There's like 100 questions in the chat and 50 in the Q&A, but I promise you all we'll get to all of your questions. And if not, there's a way to reach back out to us and Media Matters to answer your questions. But we're going to go into the second presentation about, what's coming next, what's coming during Trump's second administration. And I believe the first person to go is Courtney.
Yes, so I'm going to be speaking more here about traditional media and right-wing media. So I'm going to talk about the Fox-Trump feedback loop, how that impacted Trump's first term, and what we can expect in the second term. As we said earlier, there's a lot of different right-wing media outlets in this ecosystem. They all play a role, but Fox plays a very distinct role when it comes to Trump. So the Fox-Trump feedback loop, this is kind of our term at Media Matters to explain just what it sounds like. It's a loop. So there's a few important things to know about Trump's relationship with Fox News, and that is that Trump is personally obsessed with Fox News. He likes to watch it. He does not just hear from these people secondhand. He's a guy who loves TV. He loves a good show, and that's what he sees from Fox News. In the first term, he sent at least 1,300 tweets in response to Fox News segments. We had a senior fellow, Matt Gertz. He could track when Fox News would have a segment, and 10, 20 minutes later, Trump was tweeting about that exact segment, and it was clear he was watching Fox News in that moment. Fox, for their part, curried favor with Trump by lavishing him with praise and denouncing his enemies, and ultimately cultivated a very strong relationship. So this symbiotic relationship has benefited Fox greatly to be able to dominate and influence wide swaths of federal policymaking. Another point is Trump effectively used Fox as a staffing agency. He hired at least 20 current or former Fox staffers. So to go into these points a little bit more, when I say federal policy, for example, Trump backed an ineffective treatment as a coronavirus miracle cure. You might remember that, hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, and ivermectin. It was being championed by Fox News stars. Fox influenced at least 25 of Trump's acts of executive clemency, including pardons and commutations to clients of prominent Trump lawyers pro-Trump lawyers who appeared on Fox. He also repeatedly demanded law enforcement actions about his perceived enemies after what he watched on Fox. This includes Hillary Clinton, people involved in the Russia investigation, things like that. So the flip side of this is Fox hosts and guests know that Donald Trump is going to be watching. So if someone in this orbit has a case they would like to pitch to Trump, a Fox News segment is about as good as getting a meeting with the President of the United States. So you see this with politicians, right-wing activists. They line up on Fox to, make their case directly as if they're speaking to Trump. And in return, Trump repeatedly followed advice from Fox hosts and personalities. He brought Laura Ingraham into the White House. He was patching former Fox host Lou Dobbs into Oval Office meetings. He privately consulted with Jeanine Pirro, Tucker Carlson, Pete Hegseth, whose name some of you might be familiar with, and especially Sean Hannity. These relationships were so strong that these unofficial Fox advisors were able to dislodge and harm Trump's relationship with people he actually brought into his administration. This includes Jeff Sessions, who resigned after a power struggle with Jeanine Pirro, Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen after she had public struggles with Lou Dobbs, Richard Spencer after he had troubles with Pete Hegseth, and John Bolton after Tucker Carlson had problems with him. Sean Hannity is a particular top advisor for Trump. Trump has taken advice from Sean Hannity many times, and Hannity was a primary vehicle for Trump's 2020 election lies. He was in contact with the Trump administration and Trump officials on January 6th, and he provided Trump's staff internally with a playbook for how to manage the president after January 6th and the fallout. We know all this because of the Dominion filings, where a lot of these internal communications were made clear. We cannot emphasize enough that the relationship between Fox and Trump is very strong, and it's more than just a staffing agency. Fox is essentially an advisor arm for Trump that he takes more seriously than many people within his administration. All right, so what does that mean for his second term?
You took the question right out of my mouth. That was my question. What are they going to be doing moving forward? What can we expect? We have almost 2,000 people on here. People are watching on YouTube. What can we expect coming up so we can design a pushback?
Yeah, so, one thing I like to say as someone who is regularly in tune with Fox News, very little is a surprise to me with the Trump administration. With my husband, I often act as a translator because the craziest thing will happen and he'll be like, where did that come from? And I'm like, I know where that came from because I've been watching it on Fox for weeks before it made its way to Trump. So he's hired at least 18 Fox employees so far. We're seeing these in very high-ranking positions. His attorney or his Secretary of Defense is Pete Hegseth, for example, who has been promoted from a Fox and Friends weekend host. So we can expect a lot more collaboration there. Tulsi Gabbard, Tom Homan, Michael Waltz are prominent Fox, figures as well. And so, the inauguration speech was a good window for what we can expect. It was very much informed by right-wing media and Fox specifically. When it comes to immigration, Trump repeatedly referenced the Great Replacement theory. It's a white supremacist theory that has motivated violence in this country. And so he's, talked about foreign gang criminal networks, insane asylums emptying out, all of that. It's been heavily promoted by right-wing media for years. And Fox spent much of 24 blaming Biden for a surge in migrant crime. Again, like we talked about earlier, there was no evidence of a rising migrant crime. Migrants actually commit crimes at much lower rates than American citizens, but these people, they don't care about that.
Exactly.
They also talked about the hurricane and natural disaster response. There was a lot of lies during Hurricane Helene, for example, where they said that Biden wasn't doing anything about Hurricane Helene. They talked about relief funds not being available. And they said, so that was also said in Trump's speech. Christian nationalism is also a big part of Trump's speech. He talked about prophets, and he said he was saved by God to make America great again. We saw a lot of that kind of religion in his speech, especially after his assassination. So, I think that you can pretty much draw a through line between what policy positions Trump is planning to take with what we can see on Fox News.
Absolutely. That's the canary in the coal mine, folks. Not telling people they should be listening and watching, but we know that people, and sometimes it's playing in the barbershop, in the mall, wherever you are, that is signaling what's coming next, because that has been the play. So thank you so much for that, Courtney. Kayla, how about the tech platform?
One more second.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I completely forgot to mention this part.
Oh, go ahead.
Also have Project 2025, which has been heavily influenced by the Trump administration or by right-wing media. So Project 2025, not exclusive to Fox News, but much of Project 2025 has come from right-wing media organizations such as Heritage Foundation, and there are also a lot of Fox News people involved in Project 2025. So we've been documenting the Trump administration personnel that have ties to Project 2025, and many of them are from Fox News as well. And we have a lot of work on our website around Project 2025. We've been documenting this since last March. So if you would like to know more, please check out our website because we have a lot.
Thank you so much. And I see so many people building community right now in the chat by dropping their Blue Sky profiles. Y'all continue to do that. They come up already hyperlinked. You can click on it and follow people on Blue Sky. And I hope that Kayla and Courtney will be sharing, of course, the Media Matters contact information, but that they can also drop their information there too, so our folks can follow you. So that was a lot about Fox News. We've seen it. We see what they're going to do this year and next year. How are the tech platforms, Kayla, going to be moving?
Yeah, so we've started to see social media platforms starting to capitulate to Trump. What I'm going to talk a little bit about here is the false claims about tech platforms censoring conservatives that has led to some of this capitulation. Right-wing media exploiting the platforms and using them to spread misinfo, and then some of the rollbacks that we've seen over the last few months from social media platforms with respect to some of their content moderation policies and some of the limitations that researchers like myself and journalists have had when it comes to data to hold these platforms accountable. So first and foremost, no, tech platforms don't censor conservatives. We've seen for years right-wing media and politicians have falsely claimed that they're being censored on social media, and the tech companies are biased against them. In 2019, we put together a video of, them saying it constantly, and it has only continued these last few years. I have a short clip if we want.
I am not delusional, and people are actually discriminating against conservatives every day this way, and they're gaslighting us by saying, oh, it was just a mistake. You imagined that.
Why conservatives being censored across the social media?
Conservatives experience cancel culture on a daily basis.
The silencing of one side is the greatest threat to our republic.
So that was just a 20 seconds of a multi-minute video that we had, and that was from 2019. So this has been something that's been going on for years. And to avoid some of this ire, we've seen, social media is often capitulating to these demands, giving them special treatment. We've seen reporting that the companies intervened, on fact checking of certain right-wing content or given preferential treatment to right-wing publishers and pages. We've seen them refuse to make certain changes to their algorithm, claiming that it's going to disproportionately affect conservative users, if they were to do something to make the platform less divisive. We saw the January 6th investigators, say that social media platforms were bending their rules to avoid penalizing conservatives, and some of that contributed to the insurrection. Why do I say that that's not true? Why do I say that they're not being censored? Well, for years, we've been doing data studies showing that right-wing pages perform better on Facebook than left-leaning and ideologically non-aligned pages. This was one of our most recent studies here, but it shows a trend that we saw throughout, whether it be, just looking at their posts more broadly or just looking at, specific news events or, topics, is that we see, ideologically non-aligned pages, which is going to be like your mainstream outlets. They are always posting a lot, but they are not getting that sort of engagement. We're seeing, right-leaning pages getting the sort of engagement, whether that be about Roe v. Wade or some other court cases, or maybe it's, about LGBTQ issues. We see right-leaning pages consistently get more engagement on topics for their Facebook pages. And part of the reason is that they exploit the platforms and they spread misinfo. And part of that is algorithms help the spread of misinfo and with sensational content, and they push users to extremism. Right-wing media is good at posting, divisive content, sensational content, and that's usually primed for being amplified by the algorithms. Whether that be like videos with, captions that are, sensational and things like that. That sort of stuff spreads better on the platforms. In one study that we did, we actually found that the TikTok's For You page was leading users to, they started with maybe transphobic content, and now they got down the rabbit hole and they're looking at more misogynistic content. They're looking at anti-LGBTQ content. They're looking at, calls to violence or conspiracy theories, anti-Semitism. So the algorithms play a part. And we also then see the right-wing media and politicians take advantage of those loopholes. The platforms, sometimes they, they'll miss in some of their moderations. Right-wing media is fine with posting, false claims of voter fraud on there. They're okay with, posting political ads when there's a ban on them and kind of using the loopholes. We've also seen them kind of do that with innocuous videos. That's one tactic that they have, is where they'll post like videos of animals or something. We see this with the Epic Times. They'll post, animals, they'll get, millions of views on these videos, and then the pages, maybe they get to follow, and now the pages are posting other content as well. And so some of the policy rollbacks and data limitations that we've been seeing over the last few months is ahead of the 2024 election, YouTube reversed its misinformation policies. So they basically said, okay, we previously didn't let people talk about, false claims about 2020, saying that there was widespread fraud or errors in voting, but we're going to let people do that again. And they very quickly realized that they were allowed to now say this.
Here's another way that they try and steal this election from you. And we're allowed to say that on YouTube now, which is great. You're allowed to say steal. Freedom of speech is back? Steal. No, it's because they want to say that the election is stolen from them. That's yeah. Got to keep that one.
So as soon as, YouTube rolled back their policies, you started seeing some of these right-wing, pundits and media figures start taking advantage of that.
Here's another way.
We did a study after that, looking at what sort of content was being pushed by these right-wing figures. And we found that, after these policy changes and ahead of the election, they were, pushing misinformation about the 2020 election, but they were also pushing misinformation around 2024 before the votes were even cast. We found at least 30 right-wing channels that posted hundreds of videos that had this sort of misinformation, and they earned millions of views. And then in addition to YouTube, over the last few weeks, we saw Meta roll back its policies ahead of the inauguration. And it seemed to be an apparent direct appeal to Trump because they went to Fox News to announce it. So similar to what Courtney was talking about, they knew it was a way to get right into, to see what he's saying, to see the president, to see it. They rolled back some of their content moderations, and they kept talking about restoring free speech and things like that mirrored that kind of right-wing talking point that they're being censored. Some of the changes that they made is they rolled back some of the hate speech policies. So previously it was not allowed to, say males were superior to females, but now you're allowed to say that, and some other things. And then we've seen some of the tech CEOs kind of capitulating to Trump in other ways too. So a lot of the tech companies or their CEOs donated to Trump's inauguration, which is something that hadn't previously happened. And we saw them get a front row seat then at Trump's inauguration. They had even better seats than, some of his cabinet picks like Pete Hegseth or Kash Patel for FBI director. They actually had better seats than them. And then what we see with some of these, when they capitulate and when they pull back on their policies, it often does lead to some real world harms. And we've seen that happen with January 6th, for instance. And we did see that throughout the COVID pandemic when, they started organizing and using social media to organize, anti-mask events or anti-vaccine protests and that sort of thing. So that's what I have.
Thank you so much. Everyone, please give your emoji round of applause for Kayla and Courtney. That was a lot of really great information. I'm really eager for them to take a look at the chat. There was so many great questions that people had, especially this last part about the tech platforms and really what we can expect now moving forward. I think was the question I saw several times, Kayla. Like, we saw these policy changes. We know what they were already doing. Like, what can happen now over these next 12 months?
Yeah, unfortunately, rolling back these policies, there is going to be more hate speech potentially on the platforms. There is going to be more misinformation. In addition to already starting to roll back some of the policies, there's been reporting that like internally Meta has told, it's to not rank misinformation, to downgrade it through the algorithm. So we're starting to see the algorithm changes as well. And so that could lead to more sensational content and misinformation on the platforms.
Absolutely. And a lot of people have asked, especially in the Q&A chat, about where can they get reliable information, right? So if you do find yourself on a tech platform and someone's challenging you on something you've posted, or you want to expose a post that you see, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but that's what everyone's asking. Where can they get reliable information to share?
My personal rule of thumb is if I see something on social media, to find another, at least another source to verify it, so two or more. But also, know if it's a weird link, it's an outlet you don't know, don't trust it and try and find that information from a more reliable source.
Yeah, to Kayla's point, I found that even well-meaning people, like even myself, can be susceptible to misinformation. You know, you see something that confirms your bias, you shoot it off, you send it to people, and it might not be true. So I would still say reporting from legacy media outlets can be viewed as reputable. You know, if you see an NPR link explaining something, that's something you can trust. I get the question a lot in my personal life, you know, what media outlets should I be reading? What's the safe ones? What's the best one? There's no one right answer. You know, I would still say legacy media is there. We need them. We need reporters and we need journalists who are actually doing the work. I encourage people to find, you know, individual journalists they like and trust, but also keep a relatively diverse pool of media sources in your media diet. So the New York Times, for example, I've personally been very critical of a lot of their work, but they've also done some serious investigative work. Same thing with the Washington Post, NPR. Again, there's no perfect outlet. There's just, you have to kind of strengthen your media literacy muscle so that you can kind of view media with a critical eye. And then even if you are reading a legacy media outlet, if something feels off, if you know, can tell the tone is not, the frame is not right, you can trust that instinct. But I still would say those are kind of the best sources for accurate information, definitely over social media, podcasts, things like that.
Absolutely. And folks are sharing other examples in the chat. So there's a lot of community sharing happening. People are talking about NPR. People are saying something they read that was questionable, which I think reinforces what you just said about the New York Times. And we're seeing kind of like this move and this push towards even our legacy media and even the reliable sources trying to now, you know, move to the right in order to, I think, in their minds, hold ground. And then we've also seen that some of the publications have had to yield to their owners when it came to the endorsement of candidates. And so there's just so much at play behind the scenes. But one of the things that I also look for, guys, when you're looking at even the legacy publications is the writer, you know, because a lot of times a legacy publication will let you know, I'll just call them a writer that is not, they don't have good journalist background, do opinion pieces or share their opinions on things and write articles. And you're like, okay, I'm reading the New York Times, but it doesn't sound like the New York Times, right? It's the writer. So
Yeah.
those are all kinds of things that we really have to be diligent and look out for. And I love that suggestion, Courtney, about try to verify multiple places. And so there's a lot of good sharing in the chat on that.
Yeah, I really encourage finding journalists you trust. You know, while talking about what we can expect in the second administration, I can speak to mainstream media a little bit. And, you know, there are those concerns. We've already seen billionaire owners such as Jeff Bezos, the LA Times owner, exert that pressure. And so there is a concern. But the important thing to remember is there are still well-meaning journalists at these outlets who are feeling that pressure from their bosses as well. And, you know, the Trump administration has signaled that they are going to come after media outlets. And we're already seeing some concerning signs of kind of, you know, obeying in advance. There's a CNN directive that came out this week saying that, you know, there was a network-wide directive that they needed to be forward-looking with the Trump administration, stop talking about the his first administration, stop talking about that, keep an open mind. You know, that's really silly as a journalist, in my personal opinion. Another kind of thing we've seen is reports that CBS's parent company is considering settling with a lawsuit over Trump. So there are these signs that media outlets, and more specifically, their parent companies and owners, are thinking ahead to pressures the Trump administration can place on them and trying to comply in advance. And so I think that it's tough to navigate because, again, if you're not getting your news from those media outlets and people you trust, where are you getting it from? So I would really focus on finding those individual journalists who you feel you can trust and following their line of work.
Absolutely. And that's being echoed in the chat. I mean, you guys, you can follow Moms Rising's podcast. And also what I want folks to know is that one of the things about this digital space opening up is that we learned 15 years ago that we are all our own media makers, right? And so through sharing our stories, through sharing our blogs, from talking to our communities, we're also this vehicle for the narratives that we know are true and that we need to see. So absolutely, folks out there, we're going to always be asking you to share your story with Moms Rising, because we use that in our media. And I see people saying that they read Substack, and there just is so many people following various communities of outlets to kind of balance not just where mainstream media is going and where the tech platforms are going, but also to combat where they're leaning to right now. We've seen journalists on mainstream media lose their jobs, get taken off of assignments also for not kind of going along with this direction. And so these alternative spaces that we're all building are very important and very powerful. I saw one more question I think that we want to ask, because the big question is, what do we do about it? And we know that Kristen's about to come in again and give that double tap what we can do about it. But make sure you all are clicking on the various profiles that people are sharing. I know several people have asked, will the chat be saved so that they can get all those Blue Sky links? And I have asked that. I'm checking now, and we should have an answer before we sign off.
Yeah, we like to say that we are the least fun people at the party at Media Matters because we have all the problems. We are kind of an education forward nonprofit. So we do the research, but we try to educate people, to empower people to have the tools to take that action. I wish I knew the magic answer to stop everything we're seeing. It would make my job a lot easier if I did.
Well, you guys have helped us make our jobs easier because, you kind of read the tea leaves back in 2017 when you called Mark Zuckerberg Misinformer of the Year. I'm gonna drop this link in the chat. But, really kind of foresaw almost 10 years ago what we'd be up against right now. So everyone, please make sure you follow and support Media Matters. This is where we're going to get an arsenal of truth, so to speak. And so now, do you want to say anything before we hand it back over to Kristen?
I just want to thank everybody for listening to us today. I can share Media Matters Blue Sky in the chat, and there is a starter pack that we have, so you can, take a look at all the great researchers. Courtney and I gave you lot of an overview, but there's a lot of people that help us as well. So,
Excellent. Yep. This has been really great speaking with you guys. You can follow me on Blue Sky. It's my name, Courtney Hagel, and yeah, really great talking with you all.
And guys, we're going to drop 2 starter packs in there. We have Media Matters starter pack that we're going to drop, and there's a Moms Rising starter pack. So if I saw a couple of people just signed up from Blue Sky because they saw like all the profiles drop like 100 at a time. And you'll be able to link into this starter pack and follow a whole bunch of people at once that will be giving the information that you need to fight disinformation. So thank you so much. Another round of applause, please, for Kayla and Courtney. And now we're going to turn it over to Kristen to answer the question that's in the Q&A. It's in the chat. It's in the comments on YouTube. What can we do to fight back?
Thank you so much. I love the question, what can we do to fight back? That is the best question right now. I want to thank you all for being on right now, because fighting back is learning. It's engaging in communities like these. It's continuing to keep the pressure on. And I want to, before we dive in, thank Monifa for amazing evening, amazing emceeing, amazing insights. I want to thank Courtney and Kayla for amazing presentations, and just thank everyone again for being here. As Monifa said, we each are our own media outlets. That's one of the ways that we fight back. We heard from Kayla and Courtney tonight about how the far-right extremists are swarm building information. Well, we're working on building what we're calling a momplify network. To momplify, in other words, amplify the truth that is out there, the truth that has third-party validation, not that we're making up, but the actual truth. Many of us at Moms Rising are also former journalists, so we know about the truth and what practical ways that we need to double check, to triple check, to make sure we're telling the truth, and we are committed to spreading the truth. We're also committed to spreading our stories. One of the biggest ways that we can combat misinformation and disinformation is to share the stories about our own lives. Because what we know is that when this many people are having the same types of struggles at the same time, we don't have an epidemic of personal failures. We have national structural issues that we can and must solve together, and we're not going to solve them by emboldening hate. We're going to solve them by building ladders to opportunity, like affordable childcare, like access to paid family medical leave, like access to healthcare, which is very much under attack right now, like fair treatment of all families. Those kind of things build success for everyone. What Donald Trump is putting forward actually diminishes or stops success for everyone, and in turn stops success for our economy. So staying engaged is really important. And we want you to sign up. We'll put back in the chat, but sign up to the Let's Get Real Together program. That's action number 2. Sign up to join our online social media network of truth. We're collecting everybody's handles, and we're doing that momplify or amplify work there. The other way that we're working together is we're organizing our Moms Rising Action Network to Stop Disinformation campaign. You can sign up on that as well. And then we're figuring out ways for people to connect with everybody locally. That's our third action. Find out how you can connect with people near you locally. The other thing that we're doing is we are being the news ourselves. We have a radio show. A lot of people don't realize it. It's called Breaking Through. It is on 34 terrestrial stations across the nation. That means when people turn on their car and actually go to the radio, that they can hear Breaking Through. So we'd love to help spread the word about that. It's also as a podcast. So our stories, our voices, our amplification, ourselves as our own media outlets, our persistence, all of that is needed. We need to band together to not give up. And part of not giving up is bringing in more people. We need to be the expanse. We need to expand the movement. So we need to, everybody here today, in terms of what you can do, you can get 3 more people to be engaged. We're going to have another Moms Rising Community Zoom. We're going to do them at least once a month. We'll be putting up the link for that soon. So invite people to be part of the community Zooms. Invite people to be part of the Momplify Network. Again, that's action number 2. Invite people to be part of the Disinformation Squad, also the action. And invite people to get together locally. And don't give up. So that is the most important thing. We know that a lot of the far right strategies right now are, according to Steve Bannon, who is a self-described white supremacist who is one of the chief strategists for Donald Trump, is to flood the field with chaos so people are overwhelmed and give up. Well, we are not falling for that flooding the field with chaos, and we are not giving up. So the other thing you can do is just persistently stay engaged. Sometimes that means making sure you're only watching the news once a day or whatever works for you. And sometimes that means figuring out how many minutes or hours a week you're going to be taking action, because we want you to stay engaged with the real truth and stay engaged with action and be in community with us. So thank you so much for being on tonight. Thank you so much for all I know you've done in the past to help save and protect democracy. And thank you even more so for what I know you and we together will do into the future to make sure that we have a country eventually where every child can thrive. And we know that country is going to happen, and that it's not a question of if, but when, because of all of you, because you took time tonight, because you're going to take time in the future, and because you're going to help us build that movement with those 3 more people. Then those 3 more people tell 3 more people. That's how we became Moms Rising, you all. We started out with just a handful of people, and that handful of people told a handful of people, and we got to be over 1,099,000 actual members who are active. It was person telling person, person telling person. We got to amp that up. So that's what we can do. Might sound like a lot, but make sure that you take it in bites, just a little bit each day, and then you will move mountains of change over time. So thank you again for being on. Huge thank you to Monifa for emceeing and more, leading our country forward. And thank you to each of you persisting, resisting, and moving change every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. We will be sharing out so many links and so much information to everyone who registered. So stay tuned. The recording is on YouTube. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Woo! Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.